So it's currently 7:30 p.m. and I have been crocheting this and filming this tutorial all day long, and I just decided don't like it. I made the cardigan too small and I don't like the footage that I got. So I'm gonna take this entire thing out, refilm the entire tutorial, and I'm starting over from scratch. Was it absolutely necessary? Absolutely not. It wasn't necessary at all. Honestly, I'm sure I could have very easily turned that into a tutorial that you guys could have very easily followed along too. But I just didn't feel like making things easy for myself. I felt like making things really hard and really impossible and actually really terrible and really stressful instead. So that's what I'm doing right now. And act like I'm not, and act like it's actually the first time I'm doing it, and like it was perfect the first time around, and like I'm actually really good at my job. So starting now, this conversation never happened, and neither did the last 12 hours. So this is take 2. I'm gonna be using this yarn. I'll put a picture of like the real yarn right here. It's called True Boo. And then I'm using a 3.5mm hook. But honestly, for this pattern, your tension matters more than your hook does because the stitches are based on how big of a loop you pull up. So your hook size isn't the most important thing. I would just pick a hook size that's relatively appropriate for your yarn and you'll be fine. We're gonna start with the back panel. We are gonna be using Solomon stitch or lover's knot for the entirety of this pattern. I will give a really quick and simple tutorial on how to do this stitch, but if you've never done it before and you need more instruction than what I give you, there's tons of tutorials out there that show the stitch in much more detail, and I'll also talk about the measurement we're using and all that stuff. So here we go. So we're gonna start with a slip knot. And you're going to chain 2 and then make a single crochet into the first chain. Now we're going to make our first lover's knot. So what you're going to do is pull up a loop. I like to do about 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch, and then I grab onto this string, yarn over, and pull through. So it's essentially just a elongated chain with a big loop there. And then I'm still holding onto this string, and I'm going to insert my hook into there, and then I'm going to make a single crochet. And that's your first lover's knot. So we'll do that again. Pull up a long loop, grab onto your yarn, yarn over, pull through, insert, single crochet. There's your second lover's knot. Do it again, big loop, grab on, yarn over, pull through, insert, single crochet. So that's how you make a lover's knot. You want to try to stay as consistent as you can with the size of your loop that you pull. Now we're just going to continue making these knots until the length of our long chain here is our shoulder to shoulder measurement. So here I have my chain of lover's knots, and it is my shoulder to shoulder measurement. I made mine just a little bit longer because I want my cardigan to be a tiny bit looser. The closer you make it to your shoulder, the tighter the cardigan will be. The wider you make it, the looser the cardigan will be. And then the other thing you have to keep in mind is that you want it to be an odd number of single crochets. So starting with the first single crochet that we made, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, you get it. It has to be an odd number. So to start the second row, let me show you that. So for the second row, I'm going to place a stitch marker in that last single crochet that we made. And then I'm going to make 3 lover's knots, which are essentially your turning chains. So you'll start every row with 3 lover's knots. So those are our turning chains or turning knots, whatever you want to call them. And then we are going to insert our hook into our marked stitch. So I'm just going to take that marker out. And then I'm going to make a single crochet. So here's what we have right now. Now I'm going to make 2 lover's knots. And I'm going to skip this first single crochet and go into the second and make a single crochet. So now here's what we have. And I'm just gonna repeat that last step over and over. So make 2 lover's knots. Skip this first single crochet and single crochet into the second. And repeat again, 2 lovers knots. Skip the first, go into the second. And so on. So I'm just gonna do that until the end of the row and then I'll meet you back there. All right, so here we are at the end of the row. And now we're gonna start the third row. And to do that, once again, you make your 3 lovers knots turning chains. Then you're going to turn your work, and you want to make sure to double check, make sure you're working on the right side and you didn't accidentally flip it upside down, because that's easy to do in the beginning here. And going forward in this tutorial, I'm going to call these single crochets floating single crochets, and these ones tied down single crochets. This one is floating around and this one is tied down. So we have our 3 lovers knots turning chains, and now we're going to insert our hook into that first floating single crochet. And we're going to make a single crochet. And now for the rest of the row, we're just going to make 2 lovers knots and then single crochet into the next floating single crochet. And I'm just going to repeat that for the entire rest of the row, and then I'll meet you guys when I'm done. So here I'm about to make my last lovers knot into the end of the row, and I just wanted to show you. Here we have our tied down, and then we're going to go into this next floating single crochet. So that's how the end of the row will look. I'm just going to repeat that third row over and over and over until we have our back panel. So we're literally just making a rectangle of lovers knot stitches, nothing fancy, nothing crazy, and we want the rectangle to be the size of the back panel. So obviously the longer you make it, the longer your cardigan will be, and the less rows you do, the more cropped your cardigan will be. So that's up to you. But yeah, once you have your panel that is as long as you want it, don't fasten off yet. I'll meet you back here to start the front panels. Okay, I'm back and I have completed my back panel. So this is how long I made mine. Literally just a long rectangle of the lovers knot stitching. And now from here, we're going to make the front panels. So we still have our working yarn going. I did not fasten off. So let me show you how to make the front panel. All right, so I've laid the back panel flat and I have put 2 stitch markers into it, and I'll explain where to put those on yours. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to continue working on this, but we're going to split it in half, and we're going to work one half first and then go back and work the second half after, so that it splits into 2 in the front, which will be your open front cardigan. So basically what I've done is I put a stitch marker in the opposite side of the working yarn. You can see these are our 1, 2, 3 lovers knots, which are turning chains. So I put a stitch marker in this particular one because this particular knot marks the end of the row, if you will, or the start of the next row. And so once I've placed that, I can then determine which is the exact middle knot. So I like to look at it by how many loops do you have on either side of the middle point. So for me, that will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then on this side, we will start here and we're gonna make our first loop connect to here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that will leave me with 5 loops on either side. So now I will show you how we make our first front panel. Again, just the same thing. We're gonna start with our 3 lovers knots turning chains. And same as always, we're just going to single crochet into that first floating single crochet. And then 2 lovers knots and single crochet into the next floating single crochet. Just continue doing that until we reach the stitch marker. So it's just doing the exact same thing we've been doing, but our rectangle got smaller. And this will be our last single crochet. So now we'll just call that the end of the row, and we're going to turn our work and continue on as normal. So our 3 lovers knots turning chains, and then turn our work and go back the way we came. So just do this the amount of rows that you did for the back panel. So everything that we've done up to this row, that's how many rows we're going to repeat for the front panels, except the very last row will be just a tiny bit different. So I will meet you guys back here to do the very last row of the front panel. Okay, so I've made my whole front panel except for the very last row. So I'm going to show you, it's pretty much the exact same, but instead of 3 turning knots, knots, you're only gonna do 2. So to start the very last row, I'm just gonna do my 2 turning knots. Okay, so there are my 2 turning knots, and then I'm just gonna single crochet into this floating single crochet like normal. So the only difference for the very last row is that you do 2 turning knots instead of 3. Okay, so here's what we have. It looks kind of crazy. This is the back panel and this is the front panel, and basically it's going to go something like this once it's connected. And these look really skinny, mini, looks like a skinny scarf, but it stretches quite a bit, so it will totally fit just fine. And if yours looks skinny, don't freak out, because yeah, just remember that this stitch bunches up a lot, but when it's actually all connected, tied in the front and all that, it'll totally fit. So yeah, that's what we have right now. And then we'll go ahead and make the other front panel just the same like we just did. Basically, we will just connect our yarn to this floating single crochet right next to that middle stitch marker that we put in, and then do all of our rows of lover's knot like we just did for the other front panel. And then same thing on the very last row. Everything is the same except for the turning chains. You only do 2 lover's knots instead of 3 lover's knots. I ended up doing 25 rows for the back panel, and so obviously 25 rows for the front panel as well. So now I'm just going to make another 25 rows for the other front panel, and then we will seam up the sides and it'll actually start looking like something real. So I'm gonna go make my other front panel and I'll meet you guys when I'm done. All right, hello, it's the next day and I finished the other front panel. So here's what I have right now, our 2 skinny front panels and a long back panel. It goes on like this, and then these skinny parts will stretch out. And so what we're gonna do right now is mark off where we want our armholes, and then we're gonna seam up everything underneath it. So I'm gonna grab some stitch markers, and basically I'm just going to see how big I want my armhole to be. I'm thinking like that. Looks about right. And then I'm gonna put my stitch markers in, and then I'm just gonna match it on the other side. And of course I'm gonna double check and make sure that I have it even in the front panel and the back panel. And then we'll seam it up from there, and I'll show you how to do that. All right, so I have my armholes marked off, and this is where it gets just a little bit trickier. Every time we do a row, one side is gonna start with a floating and the other is gonna end with a tied down one. So what that means is on this panel, you'll see I have my stitch marker into a floating single crochet, and on this side I have it on a tied down single crochet. That's because if you follow this row that I marked off for my armhole and you follow it straight across, this is the stitch that you get. So basically what that means, which gets a little bit confusing, is that on this side we're going to be working into floating single crochets, and on this side we're going to be working into tied down single crochets. She likes to be included. One more thing I want to do to help with the seaming process, because once you get into seaming, it can be a little bit hard to see what's going on just with the type of stitching that we're using. It gets a little bit messy. So one thing that I think helps is I'm going to put stitch markers into every floating single crochet. You don't have to do this. It's mostly to help show you in the video, because otherwise on camera I think it'll get pretty messy and you won't really be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, so I've put stitch markers into every single floating crochet on my back panel and also my front panel. And then when I do this side, I'm going to put stitch markers into every single tied down crochet on the back panel and the front panel, just like this. So I'm going to show you how we connect this. Insert my hook into both the front panel and the back panel where I have marked right here. So into the floating single crochet on the front panel and into the floating single crochet on the back panel. And then I'm going to make a single crochet to attach them. And now what I'm going to do is make a chain that I think is roughly the same size as the lover's knots that I've been making. So I made a chain of 6 because for me, I think that's about the same size as the knots I've been making. From this one to this one, I think that's the appropriate size. If you made your knots much wider, you might want to make more chains. If you made them much smaller, you might want to make less chains. It's a little bit of a judgment call. For me, I think 6 is about the right length. So I chained 6, and now I'm going to insert my hook into the next stitch markers. So I'm going to put my hook into this one and this one into these floating single crochets, and then I'm going to make a single crochet. Now I'm just going to do that again. I'm going to chain my 6 and insert into the next stitch markers. And make a single crochet until I'm all the way at the corner stitch, and then I will fasten off. Okay, so here we have the seam that we just made. You can see these are my chain 6s. That's what it should look like. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side, but this time into the tied down single crochets instead of the floating single crochets. The tied down single crochets can be a little bit trickier to work with because they like to slide around a little bit, but just do your best because at the end of the day, even if you insert it into the wrong, Zoe, stop. This is not going to help the video. Do you mind? There's like some moving parts of them. They kind of slide around, but as long as you're just in there at any of the parts, it'll be fine. It's really not super important. Once everything is all connected, it'll stay in place. Okay, once you have it all seamed up, this is what you should have. So that's what it looks like when the seam is on the inside. It's relatively unnoticeable. So next we'll make the sleeves, and there's a few different ways you can make the sleeves. You can make short sleeves, you can make long sleeves that are straight, or you can make long sleeves that are flared. So I'll show you how to do all 3 of those options. For the sleeves, you're gonna go to your armhole, obviously, and you're gonna attach your yarn into a floating single crochet. So I like to go kind of near the armpit and on the back, so I'm gonna choose this one here, and I just attach my yarn and I make a single crochet. And I'm gonna go ahead and put a stitch marker into that first single crochet right there, and now I'm just gonna make 2 lovers knots. Now this is a little bit confusing because this is the seam right here, but it's kind of actually going to operate as a floating single crochet because you can see this is a tied down and this is a tied down, which means what's in between it is a floating single crochet. So I'm going to insert my hook into there and make a single crochet. Now I'm going to do another 2 lovers knots, and then I'm going to find the next floating single crochet. I'm going to single crochet into it. So it's pretty standard. We're just doing 2 lovers knots and then single crochet into the next floating single crochet. So yeah, just keep going around the armhole. So when you get to the end, as you can see, here's my stitch marker here. I'm actually only going to make 1 lovers knot, and then I'm going to make a triple crochet into the marked stitch. This is because we're now working in the round, so it's slightly different. So that is how I end my round, is with a triple crochet. So instead of 2 lovers knots and a single crochet, I did 1 lovers knots and a triple crochet. So now to start the next row, I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to single crochet into that triple crochet. And then I will put my stitch marker back into that single crochet. And now I will repeat that whole round. So start with 2 lovers knots, and then single crochet into the next floating single crochet, and 2 lovers knots, single crochet into the next floating single crochet, and so on until you get to the end, and then I'll show you the end one more time. So here I am at the end, and instead of doing 2 lovers knots, I'm going to do 1 lovers knot and then a triple crochet into my marked stitch to end the round. And that's my round. So again, to start it, you would chain 1, turn your work, single crochet into the triple crochet, and put your stitch marker in. If you want to make a short sleeve, then you'll just do a couple rounds until you like the length of your sleeve. And if you want to do a long sleeve with a straight sleeve, just keep doing the rounds until it reaches the length that you want on your wrist. And if you want to do a flared sleeve, stay tuned. For the flared sleeve, I go to about my mid forearm. You want to keep in mind, it's going to flare really quickly. So you don't want to do it too high up, or by the time you get down to your wrist, it's going to be like huge. So yeah, I like to go to about about my mid forearm, and then I'll show you how to do the flare. So to make the flare part of the sleeve, we are going to start the row like normal. So chain 1 and single crochet into that triple crochet that you just made, and then put your stitch marker in, and then still same thing, we're going to make 2 lovers knots. But instead of going into this next floating single crochet, we're actually going to go into the tied down single crochet and make a single crochet. This is how we're going to make our increase. So now we're going to do 2 lovers knots once again. And now we'll go into the next floating single crochet. So this is an increase round. You're always going to make 2 lovers knots, but on the increase round, we're going into the tied down single crochets as well as the floating single crochets. So 2 lovers knots and then single crochet into every single crochet. So that's how we make a increase round. And now after an increase round, we're just going to do a regular round. Like normal, since we're not increasing anymore, we're just gonna go into the floating single crochets. So go ahead and complete this round like normal, and then you'll go back to an increase round after this. So you'll alternate between increase rounds and normal rounds until you have the flare and the length that you like. But like I said, it flares out quick. So for me, I only do like 2 rounds of increases, and that'll be good for me. I'll come back and show you when I'm done. Okay, so really quickly, I just wanted to update you guys and show you how quickly it actually flares out. This is after only 2 increases. If you don't want it this flared, then maybe alternate an increased row and then 2 normal rows and then an increased row, or start your increases further down your arm so you only have to do 1 increase. Or if you like this much of an increase, then do what we did in the video. I would go back and redo this, but I'm actually extremely crunched on time. I'm trying to get this video filmed before I leave to go on vacation where I won't have any service for like a week. So I really want to get this filmed, edited, and out before I am out of service tomorrow. So I don't really have the time to go back and redo this, which is why I'm just verbally explaining to you what I would maybe do differently. I literally just added 1 more regular row, and I think it's fine. I think that's what I'm gonna go with after all. So I'm gonna keep all of that in to give you guys options for what you might wanna do, but that's what I did. I did 1 row of increase, 1 row of normal, 1 row of increase, 2 rows of normal. It could maybe even use 1 more row of normal just to make it a little longer, but I don't have the time, gotta get moving. So that's what I did. Sorry for all of the confusion, I'm losing my mind. For the front tie, I'd literally just make a long chain and then put it through the front and tie it in a bow. Yeah! All right, here it is, the finished product. I'm sorry if this video was a little bit not my absolute best work, but just please be nice to it. This video really stressed me out. I freehanded this sweater, this design, about a year ago and never really thought that I would look at it ever again. So I never really expected to do a tutorial on it, and it was kind of just like a wacky project that I did one day. And you guys left a lot of comments about how you wanted a tutorial on it, and I can't say no to you guys, so I did it, but it was pretty much me relearning how to do it as I went along because, like I said, I haven't made this sweater in about a year, and it was just a free-handed project that I did one day and didn't really think that deeply into. So hopefully this tutorial was follow alongable. It was also on a time crunch, which I'm really sorry about, and I was kind of like crashing out at the end of it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments and I'll definitely answer if there was any part that I didn't explain well enough. And other than that, don't forget to follow me on Instagram, and also please check out my Etsy to see all of my available patterns that you can buy. I have to go pack really quickly and edit this on the airplane, so but again, I really hope that I did an okay job making this tutorial. I really don't want to put anything out there that I don't feel my best about, and I don't really feel my best about this, but it was an attempt to, and I gotta go. So this is what we're working with. Yeah, I love you guys so much. Thanks for watching. Hit all of those nice buttons, and I will see you in the next one that will be much better than this one and much less chaotic and much less of a crash out, I promise. Okay, I love you. Bye.